Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, almost afternoon. I want to welcome you all to our October ALS Learning Series. Today's webinar will focus on navigating the challenges of caregiving for people living with ALS. Before we begin our webinar, I just want to let you guys know that you are muted, you're not on camera, so just relax, enjoy the presentation. It should take about an hour. You'll notice a chat box to the right of your screen. Feel free to enter any questions for our Q&A session at the end of the presentation. I'll also be dropping in some resources in the chat. So make sure you check that out as well. And I'm happy to send those out to anybody via email as well. Just let me know. And then lastly, the program is being recorded. We always want to be mindful of your time. We really appreciate you giving up your lunch hour with us. So if you have to jet or you have an appointment that you need to go to, the webinar will be on our website and also our YouTube channel within the next couple days or so. All right, so let's get started. I'll introduce you to myself. My name is Anne-Marie Doyle. I am the Community Education Manager at the Les Turner ALS Foundation. Thank you for joining our ALS Learning Series with Dr. Ann Lidsky. Before I formally introduce you to Anne, I would like to tell you a little bit more about our sponsors and the foundation. Oops. There we go. The ALS Learning Series is made possible because of the Gilbert and Jacqueline Fern Foundation and our industry partners Cytokinetics and Mitsubishi Tanaba Pharma America. And who are we? At Les Turner ALS Foundation, we are leaders in comprehensive, personalized ALS care and research. We realize that people living with ALS may feel overwhelmed and unsure of what questions to ask and what to do next. And that's really where our support service team shines. Our team is comprised of knowledgeable and compassionate nurses and social workers and counselors with many years of experience guiding people and their families affected by ALS. We offer a variety of services, including care visits by ALS support coordinators, need-based grants, and connecting people with community resources. At the Lois and Solia ALS Clinic at the Les Turner ALS Center at Northwestern Medicine, we offer access to enrollment and clinical trials and a multidisciplinary team to provide comprehensive support. We know that making decisions about ALS care can be extremely overwhelming, but we're here to help. Les Turner ALS Foundation has resources to help you learn about your options. Please feel free to visit lesturnерals.org/resources, and I'll put that in the chat as well, to learn all about the ways in which we want to help you. Pictured here is our ALS decision tool. Right now we have 2 tools that can help guide your care and decision making around nutrition and breathing options. We also have some in-depth information on care and symptoms in a more readable format. So we have our ALS resource guides and our learning series. And now I am pleased to introduce you to Dr. Ann Lidsky. She is a licensed clinical psychologist from Northwestern University and has been with the Les Turner ALS Foundation for more than 40 years and founded the first support groups offered by the foundation in 1981, and she's been facilitating these groups since their inception. In July 2021, and created the caregiver-only support groups, giving the opportunity to loved ones of people living with ALS to express their own needs, fears, and frustrations. Participants now have a voice in their own support groups, and they've expressed deep appreciation for this crucial experience. So without further ado, welcome Anne.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. I want to say just at the beginning that I am honored to be with you today. Although we in our ALS community are here for our pals, people with ALS, our hearts are deeply connected to all of you who are hard-working, compassionate caregivers. You are really our unsung heroes who deserve daily praise and expressions of appreciation for all that you do. And I mean that from the very bottom of my heart. Secondly, I understand that we have people listening to this webinar who have just begun this ALS journey, while others have been caregivers for a number of years. I know we may have spouses, wives, husbands, parents, adult children, younger children involved with the caregiving. We know that challenges increase as the disease progresses. Caregiver exhaustion, compassion fatigue, it increases with time. And my goal today is to help you develop a new mindset, find some strategies, and find renewed strength that will help you cope as you take one day at a time. We're going to address your new normal. And if, let's go to the next slide. You'll get an idea of our agenda. We're going to look at the challenges that can lead to caregiver burnout. And most importantly, we're going to gain a new understanding of caregiver self-care. And I want to say right now, I've been with the foundation, as Anne-Marie mentioned, for 40 years. And I've talked to caregivers, and when caregivers say, my friends say, you have to take care of yourself. I go, I'm in my pajamas at 1 in the afternoon, just trying to get life going. What do they mean, take care of myself? But self-care is a different perspective. And I'm going to try my hardest to help you find loving moments, turning what we would call an ordinary moment into an extraordinary, which is really where extraordinary comes from. Let's take a look at my next slide, because I'd like to introduce you to my mom. So when I was 15, I have an older brother and a younger sister. I noticed that my mom was struggling. She couldn't work a safety pin. And suddenly she was falling, but there was nothing in her way. There was no curb, no carpet. And we didn't know what was wrong. Through a series of tests, and sometimes I think the doctors were guessing, because we're now talking back in the mid-60s. There was no Les Turner ALS Foundation. There were no foundations. There weren't social workers who can help you. There were no clinics. We were very much on our own, but we finally received this diagnosis. We wondered, how were we going to move on? And we'll take a look at this next slide. When my mom began struggling with her walk and she went to a cane, my brother, my sister, and I looked at each other and said, what's going to happen? My dad was not well himself and was not involved in any of the caregiving. We wondered, and my mother wondered, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not going to walk with a cane. But that became our new normal, and something that we did adjust to. But you know, as life moved on, as days and months moved on, we went now to a wheelchair. And if you look at the next slide, we thought this wheelchair would be the most enormous change that we would have to make. And yet we adjusted to it. And at times I actually say we almost saw it as a gift, because when she could not walk and using a walker and it kept her housebound, once we were able to use the wheelchair, we were able to adjust to this new normal. But as the disease progressed and as time progressed, our frustration, our impatience grew. And without anyone to guidance, we began to feel very poorly about ourselves as caregivers. We were suffering fatigue, exhaustion. And the worst part was this feeling of not having patience for it. I can't do this anymore. My mom had a bell when she was finally pretty much bedroom bound, and she'd be able to just move her finger to ring that bell. And I was doing homework. I would go into the room when I heard the bell, and in a pretty upbeat mood, Mom, what can I get for you? And she wasn't speaking, but she would be able through eye movement, and I would understand she needed her elbow moved. Great. Mom, do you need anything else? She didn't need anything else. I'd begin to walk down the hall and that bell would ring again. I'd go back, still in a pretty good mood. Mom, did you forget something? I would help her. And as you can only imagine, I never even got to sit down to do that homework before the bell rang again. And by that time, I was raising my voice and crying, and she began to cry, and life was very difficult. I looked at this woman who I loved so, a sweet, good woman who would clean the house singing because she loved to sing. And if she didn't know the words, she hummed. And yet we had no one at that time to guide us. This became our new normal. And I hope to be at least one of the people that's going to help you develop a new perspective as you continue to caregive. Let's take a look at the next slide. Most of us can handle anything for a period of time, right? Early on when diagnosed, when your loved one was diagnosed, when my mom was diagnosed, we took on additional responsibilities and we felt pretty positive about our strength. We were determined. And yet over time, life began to feel like a never-ending stream of demands and needs, obligations to someone else, someone you love. But once you get caught in that loop of caregiving, caregivers can and they do lose sight. And I'm sure that this is something you've experienced. You don't think about your own needs and your feelings and your desires. You put them on hold. But how long can we put them on hold? And of course, so much depends on your family dynamics, the needs of your loved ones, personalities involved, and then the availability of others to help support you. And so we come to this expression of caregiver burnout. And let's take a look at that slide. When you are feeling physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted, you are feeling what we call caregiver burnout. And the stress that's related to this can compromise your physical and psychological health if not managed appropriately. And I'm going to try to help you manage that differently. This is a very complicated journey, but there are strategies that we can use to help yourselves and make the day a better day. Caregiver burnout is a state of being. It's not because you're not strong enough or you're not patient enough. It is simply not humanly possible to caregive 24/7 and not feel overwhelmed. It's not humanly possible. And I wish there were someone in the 60s that would have said this to myself or to my siblings, that we kept trying to be something that we could just not reach. Let's take a look at our next slide. family members that are outside of your home, relatives outside of your home, friends may ask you how you're doing. And it's sometimes is so hard to be honest when you believe and you feel they have no idea of what you are going through. In fact, they may ask you about your loved one and not even realizing that they're not acknowledging that you too are struggling to a point that you may be silently crying out, I don't know how much more I can do. I don't know how much more I can continue. So take a look at the next slide at stages of caregiver burnout. Dr. James Sherman wrote a book, Preventing Caregiver Burnout, and he describes these 3 stages. Frustration. You become frustrated over your loved one's deteriorating condition, no matter how good you are as a caregiver. And your frustration, of course, is with this disease. You may begin to feel isolated, lonely, underappreciated, or criticized by the person you are caring for, or even other family members. And remember, I want to remind you, I was a caregiver. And I don't want to say the main caregiver. My brother and my sister played active roles. But as a boy, 4 years older, and at my sister, 3 years younger than I in the middle, that middle daughter, really felt that I was there to keep this going. We had relatives, and some would say, it's too hard for me, Anne. I can't do it. And it's not that they were not kind and loving, but they didn't realize what was happening within our home. And my mom was a loving mom and felt terrible that she felt she had put us in this position. But you do feel underappreciated. When that bell rang that 3rd time, I felt, does she not understand that I need to do my homework, that this is so hard for me? But as a patient, as a person with ALS, it was very, very difficult to look outward. So it is easy to feel that isolation. It's understandable. And then you can feel some despair. Helpless. How do I find a few moments for myself? Feeling you simply don't have the strength to do this anymore. I will be speaking about the caregiver only group. If you are in our area, you don't even actually need to be in our area. You can be from any state to join it, or perhaps be able to create it in your locality. But participants, caregivers only in that group, all share these same concerns and feelings of despair, of frustration, and isolation. So let's look at the next slide about understanding burnout. I know that if someone who didn't understand what was going on said to me, and you need to be kind to yourself, it may have been very hard for me to really take that in. But I, as a former caregiver, I, as a facilitator of these groups, I who am so devoted to you as caregivers, I want to say to you, you have to be kind to yourself. You are doing the best that you can do. Under these most difficult circumstances, you are doing the best that you can do. If you lose it, you have to forgive yourself. We're human beings without an illness. It's easy in a relationship to lose it, to not be what you would call your best self. Many of you are juggling multiple roles, a mom, a dad, and you as a parent, caring for aging parents, having children that you're concerned about. You may be working outside of the home and you are trying to balance all of that while caring for someone with ALS. Kind to yourself. Be understanding to yourself. You are doing the best you can. A number of people are under financial pressure. And so in understanding this burnout, you may be looking at medical bills or equipment not covered by insurance. You might need a van. Most importantly, you may need, and most ALS families do eventually need, outside paid caregiving help. And all of this, though, is making you feel overwhelmed. And we're going to be coming to that outside help later on in this webinar. I ask that you be alert to these symptoms, that if you are feeling this exhaustion, pay attention truly to your eating habits. For some, they just have no time to eat, and they begin to feel really actually weakened by it. Your levels of stress may be up. You're feeling anxious and irritable. We do so much for our pal, for our loved one with ALS on an ongoing basis, bathing, dressing, feeding, getting them comfortable without a let up. It's no wonder that caregivers feel burned out. But here's the good part. Here's the part that I really want to come to. Because you may be thinking, she's telling me what I'm living. But I want to tell you that in spite of all of this stress, there are solid, productive strategies for self-care. If I had known them, I think that in those years and taking care of my mom, we would have had a different quality to our lives. So let's take a look at our next slide of self-care within this new normal that you're going to be living. Human beings are amazing, amazing, I don't want to say creatures. Human beings are amazing living things. We are resilient, we are capable of coping, and we are capable of consistently adjusting to a new normal. If someone would have told you before ALS entered your lives what you would be due to asked to do, and for how long you would be asked to do these things, most of us would have said, no way, I'll never be able to do that. And here you are, meeting every day with courage that perhaps you don't give yourself enough credit for. I'm going to try to help you see that from a new perspective. Let's look at the next slide. All right, so number one in a strategy, asking for help. You need to ask for help. You cannot do this by yourself. Most people don't like to ask for help. We just don't want to put too much on our children. We don't want to ask other family members, and we don't really even want to ask our friends. I remember not asking for help, maybe arguing between my brother and my sister and I, this challenge of it's your turn or it's your turn, because we didn't know we could ask for help. People want to help, but they are not sure what to do. If the roles were reversed now for you, and you know that you would be there for family and friends, you would not hesitate to do what you could do. It's a gift to family and friends for them to have a way to help you. It's simply not feasible for you to take on all the responsibilities of caregiving by yourself. You need to be honest with yourself. When you know you need help, it will not only prevent burnout, but it will also allow you to continue to provide the best quality of care to your loved one. If a friend would come over and keep your loved one patient and keep company with them, and you had an opportunity to simply go for a walk around the block, when you would come back, you would feel revived. We need to learn how to help, ask for help. Now, they really want something to do. So it's possible that you could say, for example, Leora, you're going to the store. Since you're going there, can you just please pick up some apples, eggs, trash bags? Or you've got a day filled with appointments with your loved one. You know that you're going to be getting home late in that day, and you say, Elisa, can you please help us with dinner tomorrow night? It would so help us, and we would so appreciate the help, and she would be so happy to make a meal. If you're finding that there's a feeling of despair in the home and you need some company, you call Erin and you say, "We could use some company tonight. Would you like to come over just for a little bit of time, have some coffee with us, a little dessert?" Or you find that you physically can't do something and you call Jeff and say, "Winter is coming. Can you help me move the lawn furniture into the garage?" Let's look at the next slide. Allow friends to visit. You will find that when people come over, fewer demands are made on you during that visit. Your loved one is most likely very happy to have someone over. Spirits are higher in the home, and that visit might be just for you. Sometimes your loved one, the patient, isn't in the mood for, truly not in the mood for a visit, but you could use a visit. Or perhaps that person is coming over to visit with your loved one while you take a bit of a break. Allow friends to visit. Don't cut yourself off. Let's take a look at the next slide. Self-care strategies. Now, I'm not someone who practices yoga, but I know, although yoga is very good, so I'm not, if you practice yoga, go for it. But it's so important. Take a breath. I remember constantly caregiving, going from feeding her through a feeding tube, getting her comfortable. It was my mom, bathing her. And I didn't take that moment to step out of the room, breath, and focus. It would have helped me. Try to get some daily exercise. Now, it may not be going to a class on any weekly basis, but if you step outside and feel sun on your face, even if it's raining, feel some rain, feel the wind. Take a break for just a moment. Step outside. If you can walk around the block, walk around that block. Don't isolate yourself. These are self-care strategies. And knowing that these slides are going to be on our ALS webinar on the website, and you're not remembering everything at this point, know that you will be able to go back, take a look at these slides, and remind yourself, what could I do when I am feeling this exhaustion? I've got to remember, what did Anne say to me? And then you will come back to this slide. Let's take a look at the next slide. I'm going to be like Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder, whispering in your ear all these strategies that you can use to help yourself through the most difficult journey of taking care of someone and loving someone with ALS. This next slide is talking about home health care. It is not possible, I'm going to say it again, humanly possible, as needs increase, for only the person living at home, most likely a spouse, to do all the caregiving. At some point, one needs to look at outside caregiver help. We're going to talk a little bit more about accepting respite care, and if and when that time comes, and it will come, that there is a discussion with the nurse you're connected to, with social work connected to, that you will be able to look at hospice care. Hiring a caregiver does not mean that you lack any skills. And many times the patient says, "I don't want anyone else in the house. You could do it. You could put on my shoes, tie my shoes, get me dressed, give me breakfast. I know you can do it." In the meantime, though, you physically and emotionally are wearing down. You need to keep home health care very much in the forefront of your mind. Let's take a look at the next slide, and I want to mention again caregiver-only support groups. When we were having and we continue to have, Zoom groups that have patients, people with ALS, and caregivers present together, and those are wonderful, wonderful groups. But we realized that caregivers needed a voice, and This has nothing to do with how much love and how devoted they are to their loved ones, to the person with ALS, but they needed a voice in their own group. And so a little over a year ago, we created these groups, and participants finally feel that they are in a setting completely non-judgmental and accepting atmosphere. And most importantly, that there are people who are feeling exactly as they are feeling, who are frustrated, who are weeping because they don't know what more they can do. Some feel underappreciated. They are all devoted to their loved one, and their loved one is a good human being, but this is a very complicated situation. Caregiver only groups give you an opportunity, it is a strategy to have your voice heard. And they're open, and if you want to find more out about them, you'll be able to visit the Les Turner ALS website, and you'll see that right there on your slide, and we'll give it to you again later on. Let's take a look at our next slide. Dynamics need to change. It's not possible as you're entering this journey and as the person who, of course, is becoming a caregiver with something that you never thought that you would need to do, the relationship with your loved one is going to change. Both you and your pal may sense a shift in the dynamics of your relationship. You're adjusting to a new role as a caregiver, and the person who is receiving care needs to adjust to relying on you for assistance. And so, of course, the dynamics in the relationship need to change. They need to change. Now, every relationship is different, and it depends on so many factors. Think of what the previous relationship dynamics were. If the person was independent before, or perhaps dependent, even before the diagnosis, we need to look at the speed that the disease progresses and how it progresses, the needs progress, and we have to look at the personality of the person with ALS and at your personality. We all have different inner resources. It's a very common misconception that ALS does not impact thinking and behavior. Some people living with ALS may eventually, not all, but some will eventually experience some change in cognitive functioning or behavior. The cognitive and behavioral impairment in ALS can vary from individual to individual. Person living with ALS may experience themselves and recognize that they're more irritable. You may see that there's a decrease in their insight, all of which changes the dynamics of your relationship. This can become very challenging for the caregiver. When you simply want your loved one to be able to make decisions, and then you realize there are times that you might need to step in and take a stand, how do you do that? I'll give you an example. So much is available for your loved one that makes daily living easier and of higher quality. There are specialized utensils so that they remain independent in being able to eat by themselves. There are clothing adaptations, slip-on shoes instead of tying shoes. Personal care help, not only raised toilet seats, but wonderful bidets. Ultimately, it's good for both of you because it's certainly better for your loved one, but it's also better for you, right? It takes some of the stress off of you, but your loved one is adamant not to use those things. No, do not bring those devices into my house. Do not bring that equipment into this house. And so for you, when do you take a stand? When do you begin to feel that there's perhaps some decreased insight and you're worried about needing to just step in? And I'm going to circle around to this challenge in just a moment. We're going to come back. Let's take a look at the next slide and talk about communication with compassion and with patience and honesty. Many caregivers, because of their love for their pal, find themselves in a cycle, dancing as fast as they can, dancing as fast as you can, trying to do everything that they are asked, that you are asked of, right when it's asked, and you find yourself holding in some resentment, or you express anger and a bit of a rage, which is not productive. You feel terrible about it. They feel terrible, but it's humanly understandable that you begin to realize that this resentment is building up and you're putting aside your ability to express what you're feeling. So I want to talk to you about so important about this communication and finding your voice. So let's think back the last time you were on an airplane and you remember you're told to put your oxygen mask on first before placing it on someone who is with you but dependent on you, right? You need to take care of you. And again, I'm not talking about go take care of yourself and leave your loved one not properly cared for. No, no. You need to think about some of these strategies of self-care that will help you. And this is leading me to setting healthy, reasonable boundaries. And I'll talk to you what I mean by boundaries that say you matter. You matter. Without having your voice, it is understandable that resentment is going to build. But by expressing a message that this is also difficult for you, that you need to be acknowledged and appreciated, by expressing this message, it's a huge difference in the dynamics within your home. I'm thinking back even to my mom. And when I say express myself, if I had gone in, someone would have guided me. And I don't think I had the maturity, but even if I had the maturity, I just don't think I would have done it. I needed to say, Mom, I love you, but this is also hard for me. And so I want to take care of everything that I can do right now, but I need 20 minutes without interruption. She would have understood it, but I didn't express that. I didn't have a voice because I wasn't sure how to do that. I want you to see that even a small change in this overwhelming cycle of fatigue and burnout can help you feel just a little bit of a sense of calm. And I'll use the word empowerment, but having a voice. So when you wake up in the morning, when you wake up tomorrow morning, I want you to ask yourself, what do I want to see happen today? What do I want to happen today? What do I need? Perhaps it's simply just to get a break. Stop, break, good breath, and focus before you communicate your need or your desire to your loved one. I'm going to help you do that. Whether it's taking a walk, whether you need some time alone, whether or not you need a lunch with a friend, remind yourself you can cope with the challenges in your life, but it's so much better to do that if you have a voice in what you're doing. Here's my example, my current example. I'm working with a wonderful, devoted caregiver who bathes, dresses, feeds her husband the moment he wakes up in the morning. She lifts him into a shower chair, takes him off, gets him dressed, feeds him, and does whatever she needs to do to keep him comfortable. Unfortunately, he was finding fault in what she did, complained, made demands throughout the day, and unfortunately, showed very little appreciation. Understandably, she was holding in anger and a built up resentment. But with some encouragement, this very hard working, loving wife, loving caregiver finally found her voice and set some healthy boundaries. And these were her love. These were her words of love to her husband. I love you, but I also matter. And this life is hard for me as well. I deserve appreciation. And today, once I have you safely in your chair, once you have your BiPAP on, and I know bathroom needs are met, I need to go on a 30-minute walk. It was a safe period of time for her to be able to leave him. And she went on that walk. And I want you to know, upon return, she entered her home, went up to her husband, she thanked him, and she said, I love you. It was a different morning for her, a different morning because she found her voice. It's hard setting those boundaries. It's hard getting up almost the courage to be able to do it, but you can do it with great compassion. You are able to say, I know this is so hard for you and I love you and I'm devoted to you, but I need to share how I'm feeling. It was healthy for her. It was healthy for her husband to get the message that she also mattered. Boundaries are not about the patient. They are about you. They are for you. They are a gift to yourself. Another caregiver currently was struggling with her loved one who refused to use any of the adaptive equipment or devices in their home, as I mentioned just a little bit earlier. Something as simple as slip-on shoes versus his wife on her knees, retying the laces, her back was aching, everything was an argument. He didn't want to use the cane, he didn't want to use the walker, and then of course there were treacherous falls. His caregiving wife was exhausted and became depressed, understandably. And after some well-needed guidance and support, she too found her voice. With compassion and with calm, she finally set some boundaries. She respected his need for independence, right? She knew she wanted him to feel that sense of independence, but she also knew that they both would have a better quality of life, and she had to take a stand. Her husband had some impaired decision-making, and setting these simple boundaries dramatically changed the dynamics in her home. And she brought these devices in, all of that which increased the quality of her life and of course of her husband's life. I encourage you later on to take a look, go onto our website and take a look at past webinars, but in particular now I want to mention the one that is titled ALS and Activities of Daily Life. All the webinars are outstanding, but this one will introduce you to all that will add to the quality of your life, some of these things that I have just mentioned earlier on. I want to remind you, as truly, I wish again someone would have said it to me, you need to take regular stress relieving breaks throughout your day. If it's a cup of tea, it's taking a breath, it's using your voice to say to your loved one, I just need to step into the other room for a few moments. This doesn't mean that you would not respond instantly to something that is life-threatening, but they love you also. And so with expressing how you feel will make a difference. If you say, I need to talk to one of your kids on the phone, I need 10 minutes without interruption. Are you all right? You're settled? I will be back in here to check. You can do this. We human beings are amazingly resilient and strong. Take those deep breaths. And when I say be kind to yourself, forgive yourself if you lose it. Oh, how I wish someone would have said that to me when I lost patience with my mom. At the time, caregiving is hard. You are doing the best you can. And what makes it harder, of course, as you're doing all of this, is that you're worried about the future. Will there be any sense of fulfillment in these days ahead? And of course, we carry the anticipated loss. Understandably, when your husband or your wife or your loved one who might be a child, a grandparent, was diagnosed with ALS, you wondered, what is my future going to look like now? And although it may be different, you can enjoy time together. So let's take a look at our next slide. Tips to creating a fulfilling life. Live in the present. I know it's hard to do. I want to tell you because if I didn't go through it, hadn't gone through it myself, you have every right to say, and you have no idea. I do know. It is so worth, though, since we don't know what the future brings, we don't even know what next week brings, what tomorrow brings. Staying, if you can, in the present. If you think to yourself, there are so many things I want to accomplish, still I want to accomplish one thing at a time. You don't have to accomplish everything. And honestly, for the person with ALS and for yourself, when we can focus on what you can do, what they can do, and not necessarily on what a patient cannot do, that also is helpful. I used to speak with ALS patients, and they appear to have such a good sense of a positive outlook. And I would say, how do you do that? And they go, I'm focusing on what I have. And if they lost their voice and they're able to write in the days of old, back in the 60s, there was nothing to help you with speech. And of course, you know, today there is so much. The patient never loses their voice. I want to continue to try to do things you enjoy, continue to do what you like to do together. Engaging in those activities together relieves stress. So if the loved one is able to still get outside and you use a wheelchair, go to botanic gardens together. Go to the zoo. I remember taking my mom in a wheelchair to the zoo. She loved it. It's hard not to think about what you have to do. Is it worth going to botanic gardens when I have to clean the house? Or yes, it is. Be there 100% with each other. Don't think about what is waiting for you. Those moments, that ordinary moment, can be extraordinary. You might even find things and time to do that you didn't do together prior to the diagnosis. Go sit out in the backyard while this weather is good. Listen to the birds. A patient taught me that. He was a busy physician and involved with all sorts of boards. And he said, I didn't sit outside and smell the roses. Feel the wind on your face, sit together, watch TV and hold hands. It reminded me as I was preparing to address you and thank God, my husband is well. But if we watch TV, I'm going to make sure I sit next to him and hold his hand, read books in the same room, listen to music, turn music on, your favorite music, let it play. You will turn what is really an ordinary moment into an extraordinary. It can happen. Look at the next slide. Intimacy is very important for every aspect of our well-being, and you may need to redefine that. But I want to encourage you. Be loving. When you walk into a room, remember, you've been feeling overwhelmed. You've been feeling impatient, sometimes frustrated, or you might have lost your temper. You're doing so much on that. Stop for just a moment. Touch their cheek by and embrace them. Caress a shoulder. Offer a sweet kiss. A kiss on the head, out of the blue. It doesn't have to be because you maybe lost it for a moment, and yet that still is a very good time to come up and take them tenderly and give them a kiss and say, I'm sorry I lost it. I'm sorry. But for no reason, to walk by and touch their shoulders and caress them and caress their hair, that's an ordinary moment turned extra. I'd like you to look at our final slide. And in this final slide, this is what I wish for you. Using all the strategies that we shared, being kind to yourself, knowing you have strength. You have strength. Human beings are strong and they're courageous. You are courageous. I wish for you love and patience, that internal strength, perseverance, because they will all lead to these very treasured moments, individual moments that will be so important for you to look back on. And I want to thank you for the sacred work that you do and for being with us on this webinar. Thank you, Anne Marie.
Thank you so much, Anne. I appreciate everything that you just explained to all of us. I also want to take time out to apologize to you, Anne, and to everybody who was on this call. I apologize for the issues at the beginning of the talk and not being able to share my screen. Luckily, I think most of them were just introductory or picture slides, but as a reminder, the webinar, the slides, and any handouts or things that I dropped into the chat will be available on our website within the next day or two. And I'm just checking through, we had some questions submitted prior to the talk.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit more, or do you have any advice on like young caregivers or children who are now taking on some responsibilities of caregiving?
Yes, that would be great. I'd be happy to address that. So again, as for myself, when my brother and my sister and I were the people involved in caring for my mom until she eventually, due to needing a trach and much more care and needed to go into a nursing home, it was difficult that an adult did not truly step up. So what I want to say, and families who have young children, number one, I want to say that where they can help, you should allow them to help, but you need to make that decision. What's appropriate help for them? You need, number one, keeping them company, parents needing to have their children around, or the parent needing to have the children around. That's wonderful. If there is something, depending on age again, that your loved one needs and you have children who can bring them the book, and some even, again, it all depends on age, helping them get a meal together. But what you want to be cautious about is there are some things that young children would have a difficult time doing, and it would be hard for them to process it. They will ask questions, and you are giving them answers just to what they are asking, not beyond the question, not beyond the question. I think, and I do want to say that we're cautious about finding a balance between putting too much on that child and yet at the same time not allowing them to participate. We have a number of caregivers in our caregiver only group who have children who are young, 6, 8, 12 years old. For some of them, this is their new normal. So when they go to their parent and they want to talk to them about school, they're not even taking note of the feeding tube or the wheelchair that they're in. This is their mom or this is their dad. But we have had situations where young children have been asked to be put in a situation of caring, that helping someone get dressed, their shoes, socks, that's fine. Bathing a parent, there needs to be a line drawn where you think of the psyche of that child. But let them do what they can do. They will feel much better if they're participating in appropriate care.
Yeah. Oh, and thank you for that. And you sort of touched on this, but any advice? I know I come from a large family with different sibling dynamics, but any advice on some family support if there's maybe some perceived unevenness in the care of a parent, or just differences in communication styles between siblings?
Oh, is this a challenge? And it's also very common. It's
Yeah.
also very common. When there are siblings within the home, there is no question there is stress. It's your turn. No, it's your turn. I'm doing more. I did that before. And if the caregiving person, whether it's in most cases, it's the parent, but sometimes a grandparent can get involved, an aunt or an uncle can get involved, where someone needs to be able to sit with the children outside in a private place, outside of where the patient is, and let them also have their voice. But we have many situations where there are adult children, and one child might live, and they're not children, they're young adults with families of their own. One might live a little closer. One might have different resources. Their relationship with their parent may be different. And so I think that, with different communication, if siblings can, and I say this to all who are listening and to parents who are listening who have adult children who are not on this webinar, is to be able to openly share the stress that they're feeling. And at the end of the day, the person who might feel that they're doing more, when the end of this journey comes, they know what they have done. You know what you have done, that you have done your best. Your sibling who is out of town and cannot come in often is probably doing the best they can do. My relatives who I felt, where were they? They were doing the best that they could do. Not everyone has the resources within, but I would try to express it, Anne Marie. If you keep it in and you're angry at your brother or sister, it will come out in some rage that will not be productive. One needs to be calm and have a healthy conversation.
Oh,
But
that's
it is
so
common. Right? Every family, anyone listening who feels maybe only their adult children are going through this, this is very, very common. It doesn't make it easier, but know that you haven't done anything wrong in raising these children. It's just their circumstances, who they're married to, do they have children, do they not have children, are they working outside of the home? So many different dynamics.
Yeah. Oh, that's so helpful, and thank you so much. Um, Let me just check our questions one more time. I do want to share with you. Um, Gina said, thank you so much. I feel better just listening to you. And
Oh.
the gift that you provided everyone on this call today, we're just indebted to you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And those of you that have questions about respite coverage and how it's covered by insurance, I can drop those in an extra slide at the end of this presentation with all the other links that I had dropped in the chat. Depending on your state, there can be some state coverage or state grants. And I know that in particular in Michigan, Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota, Team Gleason can offer respite grants in those states as well due to ALS in the heartland. So I'll put all of that in some resources, and remember, everything will be up on our website within the next day or two. I cannot thank you all enough for your attendance and your patience again. Oh, you'd think after all of this COVID stuff, we wouldn't have technical difficulties.
Yeah, and I had said to Anne Marie, my only concern was having tech difficulties. on my end of it, right? And so I wasn't even aware, of course, that you were having any technical difficulties, but I want to thank the people again to take this time to listen when you have someone you are taking care of, and not to give up hope that even these slight changes will make a difference truly, truly in the quality of your day.
Yeah. And just some extra plugs before we go. We have our 12th annual Les Turner Symposium on ALS. It's Monday, November 7th. Registration is still open. You can learn more and register at lesturners.com/symposium. And then because our symposium is in November, we're going to take a break on our ALS learning series for November, but we will be back live again December 8th. It's a Thursday again at lunchtime. Hannah Reed, a PT or a physical therapist from Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, is going to be talking about ALS and exercise. I think this is a just can't miss. I'm so excited for this talk that she'll be giving. And then again, I want to thank you all for your participation today. I appreciate you giving up your afternoon, and I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you. It means the world to us. Join us again this coming December, but if you can also join us in November for our symposium, we'd love to see you and interact with you. You will get a survey at the end of this presentation. Please fill it out. It helps us continue to put these webinars on, and it provides us with just wonderful feedback, so we know that we always have areas to improve. We appreciate that. And thank you all. Have a wonderful day and stay healthy, all. Bye.
Bye.